Maninder sir, good morning.
Good morning, Soumya.
Can you start, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. So before starting the lecture, just I'm introducing the expert of the session. Good morning, all. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce the speaker of the session, Dr. Maninder Singh, Professor, Thapar University, who is going to talk about the survival and security by virtue of secure coding. Dr. Maninder Singh obtained his PhD degree in computer science and engineering from Thapar University, Patiala. Currently, he is professor and head of the department, Computer Science and Engineering, Thapar University. He is 24 year of teaching and research experience. His research interest includes network security, software engineering, parallel and distributed computing, cyber physical system and security, and IoT. He has completed many research projects and consultancies like DRDO, TCS, and other organizations. He has his credit of publishing more than 60 research papers in international journals and conferences. 7 PhD and 46 MTech degree has been awarded under his guidance. He is currently going for PhD research scholars. He has authored multiple mock sessions, video lecture series for EMRC and CEC India. He is also an active reviewer of many international and national journals. Now I request to Dr. Maninder sir, please join us for a session. Welcome, sir.
So, thank you, Dr. Samavir. Very good morning to all of you. So, if I may request few of you people to turn on your videos so that we can have a better interaction because interactive session. Thank you, Palvi. I want few more people to make their videos on. Because this will be a kind of a hardcore discussion which will happen around security. So I want few people with me so that we can talk and discuss rather than me only speaking. Okay. Thank you, Amandeep. At least 1 or 2 more, if you can do that, that would be great. Okay, nevertheless, I think other people are busy in their daily chores and they have just made themselves available by virtue of being in the Mr. India format. No problem. Thank you, Surbi. Thank you for joining. Okay, let's. I'm just going to share my screen, and then we are going to talk about what is this talk all about and what we are going to discuss today. Okay. So you just let me know when you are able to see my screen. Is it perfectly fine? Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thanks, Aman. Now let's talk about today's topic. The thing is like this: if you go to any security conference or workshop, usually the people come with a few slides and discuss those slides, but I have a very different way of presenting my material. So rather than doing any kind of a presentation, whatever we'll learn live. So we'll have a kind of it's kind of a, you can say it's a workshop come lecture type of thing. So where I will let you know how the secure coding can help you in order to survive in this hyper-connected world. Okay. Now there are two things which we have to discuss prior to beginning this particular lecture. Number one is when we say secure coding, okay, why we need to do a secure coding. Okay, so in that case, we need to remember these 2-3 things here. Let me draw a triangle first so that I can explain a part. Okay, so let's say I have a triangle, and this triangle is called the development triangle. Okay, so development triangle. So I am going to list down the vertex and what are the values on that particular vertex. So this is the triangle which we have made. Now, this at the center, you have the development of a software which is happening. Okay. On the one vertex, we have a functionality of the software. This part is security of the software. And here we have ease of use. So these are the 3 vertices of this particular triangle. Right? Now our job is to maintain the balance of this development within the ambit of these 3 vertices. If you don't do that, it may so happen that we end up in developing a software which is actually has a tilt on one of the sides. Like let me give you an example. Why people prefer Windows operating environment? Aman, why people prefer Windows operating environment? Aman, you can unmute yourself and we can talk, please. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Yeah.
One use Windows operating system because of it is very easy to use and very.
So that's what even the Dipanshu is saying. We actually love Windows operating system because it's easy to use. It's a graphical user interface and people get attracted, right? So that means the much more emphasis is on this part of the triangle. So that means we have pulled this development ball into this side. So we have lost on some kind of a functionality and we have lost on some kind of a security. So there is not complete balance which is being kept. I'm just giving you one example. Similarly, if you take example of a Linux operating system. So Linux operating system have put much more effort on security. So it may not give that kind of a ease of use to the user as Windows was giving. So that means here also the emphasis went on one of the axes. So what is to be done in order to develop a software which will give me the security, ease of use and functionality? I need to keep this balance. This ball should remain in the center. So ease of use and security. Right now, let me give you another example. For example, you people purchase a Windows operating system. You people purchase. I am just highlighting this line. You have purchased a Windows operating system. Now, let's say when you are installing, instead of formatting your C drive, it formatted your D drive where whole of your data was there. Okay, you are installing a new operating system, so it formatted accidentally the D drive rather than formatting C drive. There was some bug. Okay, so what is your first reaction? You have purchased the operating system. Pallavi, what you will do?
I'll probably call the vendor from whom I've purchased that there's some issue with the installation.
Precisely, this is what you are going to do. You are going to actually call some number 1800, 100, 100, something. Okay. So this is a call center number of one of the organizations. So you will call that number. They will, Prince is saying that we will try to retrieve the data before booting. So if you have purchased, this is the first thing you will do rather than booting, because then you are kind of binded to ask that particular company that what went wrong, because when you didn't knew that my data will get formatted, right? So you're going to call this. Now what these people will do, they will not assign their development team to give you a workaround. Okay, so what these people will do, first of all, they will make it as candidate one. Okay, so there is a list which is called CAN list. So they will say CAN1, and they will give some kind of a narration to whatever you have written in an email, or when you called, you have given them some kind of a dialogue that this has happened, I was doing this. So this lady who is listening to this call will prepare a kind of a note and give it a number CAN1. That's it. She will not do anything, because she knows it may be there are hundreds and thousands of windows which were sold, but only this guy is telling me that there is a problem. So it may be he might have done something wrong. So she says that we'll come back to you after 48 hours or 24 hours. I'll escalate this. But actually, she is going to just number it as CAN1 and keep it in the repository. Now, let's say on the same day or another day, there is some other call which has come from Sandeep, and Sandeep lives in Jharkhand. And he says, I was installing Windows, it formatted my D drive instead of C drive. Now this is matching. Whatever the content was here, this content is matching. So now this will be given +1. That means this particular problem has now 2 people who have listed the same kind of problem. So then again a call comes, it may become 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. So let's say 10 is the threshold value. So when CAN reaches 10, now there is a bell which rings in Microsoft. Arey yaar, we have done some mistake. It is not that the users have done some mistake. There is some issue which has happened in our software. Let's call the product team, call the development team, and find out what the reason could be. So once the development team comes, they also do experimentation. They actually replicate this scenario in the production environment. So once they replicate, they also find, okay, there is some problem in the code that it is now formatting D drive. So what they will do then? They will release either a hotfix, depending upon the severity, or patch. This is why the patch and hotfixes are released for a particular software. Hotfix is a solution which can be applied to the machine without power down the machine. So your machine is running, you can apply a hotfix, you don't need to make this system shut down. That is called hotfix. Another is you will apply a patch. So when I apply patch, what happens? Patch will require you to reboot the system. So that means there is a downtime which is involved in patching. So depending on the severity of the problem, these people will release either a hotfix or a patch, and also their number is, and they will call it as CVE. This is called common vulnerability and exposure. And they will give it a number. Let's say they will give it a number 2021, March 3rd, 25th. 25th March 2021, a CVE was discovered. Common vulnerability and exposure. Now this detail is available on the website. It will tell you what are the remedial actions which need to perform in order to safeguard your systems against this vulnerability. Okay, so if you look at these vulnerabilities, I'll show you. Let's see this part. So there is a site called cve.mpre.org. This particular organization maintains the common vulnerability and exposure lists. Now Now, if you look here, there are 150,886 records of CVEs available. And these are across the vendors. This is not only the Microsoft or a Linux. There are n number of vendors who have released some kind of a common vulnerability and exposure. Now the question comes, why these vulnerabilities are there? Let me show you one or two. Let's say I want to search for vulnerability in Linux. Okay. So see, in 2021 only, there are lots of many vulnerabilities which were discovered in the Linux kernel itself. So it says this is the BPF verifier in Linux kernel did not properly handle mod 32, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so each of this CVE has some description. If you click on this part, you will be able to know what kind of attack it is and how this attack can be created. And what are the repercussions if this attack happens on a particular system. Now, if you haven't applied this patch or whatever they are mentioning here, if you haven't done that, then you are only to be blamed. You cannot take these people to the court that I have purchased operating system and this has this vulnerability. They say this vulnerability is already in the public space. We have mentioned it in our one of the websites and it's available. Now the problem here is, if we go back to this and let me search for Cisco. Cisco also have 5,367 CVE records. Let's say people say Mac is more, let's say Mac operating system, Mac OS. So Mac OS also has 805 vulnerabilities. Okay, and these vulnerabilities can be of an operating environment. These vulnerabilities can be of an application which is running on this operating environment. So now the root cause of this we need to understand. The root cause is simply one only, and that is poor programming. Poor programming is the root cause of all the security issues. The reason being, we never teach our students that this is how to do a secure coding. We teach them how to code. We tell them these are the functions which are available, but we never tell them what will happen if I use this function. It's very similar. The doctor will say, okay, you go and take this medicine, but he will not tell you what are the side effects of this medicine. The same thing is happening here. We are telling our students that these kind of things will happen, but we'll never tell that what is the problem with this particular function. Let me give you one example. But still, I am very sorry to say I need few videos to be on. I cannot teach in this mode. Please, if you really want to learn something, you really want to discuss something, make your videos on. And if you are here for certificate will get issued. I'll request Professor Harsh to give you the certificate, even extra one certificate. But that should not be the motive of this kind of discussions. Okay. So that means the root causes, we need to tell our students that why we are using this. Okay. Let me give you an example. How many people have programmed in C language? Everybody. Okay. Everybody would have done that at one point of time. C or C++. So you would have used this kind of function. Gets function we use. But did anybody told you gets has a problem? It has an inherent problem. But no one would have told us. The reason is this function never checks that how big a string a person can give. The person can give 2000 characters. And these 2000 characters, they go into an array of 100. Now, what will happen if in an array of 100, I push 2000 characters. So obviously this thing is going to go into the stack, and stack will overflow, and we'll have a problem. So now this is a very common function, gets function. So similarly, there are n number of other functions which are vulnerable to today's security world. So we need to understand those criticalities in the code in order to find out where is the problem. Now, many of us, whenever we purchase a software from the market, so software is given to us as a executable. We never get a source code. So we get an executable file. From executable file, how I can come to know that this file is fishy? Number one, we are dependent upon antivirus. If I have a legitimate antivirus program on a machine, when I try to run this executable, this antivirus will raise a voice. It will say there is a problem. Or even it can delete this file, that this is malicious code, you must delete this. But if this code has been given to you by somebody who you trust, even if your antivirus will say this code has some problem, you will still say, okay, yaar. Even that fellow will say your antivirus will beep and it will say there is a problem. But I tell you there is no problem. Please go and install this. What you will do? You will believe. You will install. As soon as install, it will show you a beautiful window. You will say there is no problem, yaar. But in the background, it may do something. And that's how the Trojans work. Trojan is a kind of a code which sits in a legitimate file. And when you run that file, it will perform the predefined task, but also do something else on your system. And today's lecture is dedicated to this only. Today, we are going to create a Trojan. Are you excited? Let's do it, okay? So our job is to create a Trojan today. And how we are going to create a Trojan? We are not going to use any kind of environment or any kind of tool to help us creating a Trojan. We'll use our programming expertise in order to know, our debugging expertise in order to know how an executable works, and then we'll inject that code inside the already executable file. But in order to do that, we need to have some background. Kuch background hona padega. Okay? Now that background is you must know how the debuggers work. Because I'm going to get from the market only the executable file. So I must know what that executable file looks like. What is there inside that executable file? Okay. So what we are going to do, we are going to check the entry point of a program. You know, there is an entry point of a program. Entry point points here, and there is an instruction which gets executed. After that, series of instruction will execute. And as soon as you will encounter a call instruction, the call instruction will shift the focus to some other memory area. And then at the last, you will have a return statement. And from the return statement, we'll return back and start the execution. This is the complete flow of your program. This is how your program runs inside memory. Okay, so now our job is we are going to hijack this pointer. We will say, Bhaiya, you don't need to execute this, you execute my instruction. And what this my instruction will do, it will take me to a malicious code which I will put inside the memory of your computer at some place. Now what I'll do, I'll hijack the control. Now it will point to this code. So once I have done with this code, I'll return back and start executing the original flow of a program. That means what I feel, if I am a user, what I feel, there is nothing bad which has happened. But actually, while running the code, it has also executed some other code, and that code may create a problem. So are you ready to take this journey?
Yes.
You understood the concept, what we are going to do. Anybody has any question at this point of time, you can ask. Otherwise, we are going to go for this particular practical. Okay. For this experimentation, what we are going to do, we are going to download a file from the internet, and that file is called putty.exe. You can have any executable. This is just an example which I have taken, because putty is very, very known application, and n number of people download this application. Now this putty application does what? It makes a remote login to a Linux box. This is the job. This is one of the jobs of a putty. So you can log in remotely onto a machine by using a SSH connection. Okay, so what we are going to do, we are going to manipulate this file. So when you will run putty, it will open up the window to get connected to the remote machine, but also it will do something else. So that something else I have divided into three parts. One is generic, another is dangerous, and third one is more dangerous. Okay, so all these three variants today we are going to see that how we can manipulate and what we need to do in order to get these things done. Okay. So let's, I'm going to go to my machine where I have this putty program. Are you able to see this screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Now you see there is a putty program here. So when I double click on putty, it opens up a dialog box. And I say load, I open, so it shows me a black window. I can hook on to my Linux box from here. Okay, perfectly fine. There's nothing else being done by this program. So this program is running perfectly fine. I have downloaded this program. I'll just exit out of this window. It was just to showcase that how putty works and for what task the putty is being used here in this scenario. So the first thing what I am going to do, I am not going to disturb the original putty. So I'll make a copy of this and I'll name it as NIT Jalandhar, NITJ. Okay. So now, first of all, let's study this NITJ file, what this file is in a debugger, because it is an executable file. So executable file, I'll not be able to see anything. Okay, so what I am going to do, I am going to open a debugger called OLIDBG. This is the debugger, and I'll open NITJ file here. Are you able to read this? Is it visible properly to you people?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
No, sir. The size is very small.
Size is very small. So just let me do one more thing. I'll just. Is it okay now to some extent? But still, if you are not able to, I'll do one more experiment. I'll just magnify the screen. Okay. Now you able to see this?
Yes,
sir.
Yes, sir.
To some extent it would be, okay? So let's discuss this part. This particular screen has 4 panes. This pane is basically your logical memory addresses. Okay, 0046F4C6. This is the logical memory address. So each process which runs in your operating environment, basically it is mapped to this logical address. So each process, let's say I have a 2 GB of RAM. So the process which is running, let's say there are 3 processes running A, B, C. Each will have the accessibility of that 2 GB space. Now you will say then there will be a problem because I have only that 2 GB RAM. But these are the logical addresses. These are not the physical addresses of your RAM. So all addresses are logical. So they are actually getting mapped to some physical portion of your RAM. Right? So when your CPU is going to execute this part, the CPU is going to look at this address and this instruction. So this is your instruction set. So when instruction is E8, that means this is a call to this particular address. And this is a subroutine. That the first instruction is a subroutine. And if I go to the next instruction, this is a jump instruction. That means this part is an instruction set of your CPU, and this part are the mnemonics. Ye mnemonics hai in your assembly code. So this is the first pane of your OLEDBG debugger. And then we have a second pane. In the second pane, we have the register values. Now, if you see at this point of time, my program is on this particular line. And this particular line is the module entry point. So my EIP, which is my instruction pointer, it is pointing to 0046F4C6, which is module entry point. I am entering into this program by virtue of this particular address. And my instruction pointer is pointing to this address. Okay, so these are 2 panes. Then comes the third one. This third one at the bottom, left bottom, is your memory. This is memory dump. What is there in the memory? Okay, and this 4th pane on the right side is your stack. This is your stack. Okay, this is the stack, this is memory, these are my instructions, and this is my CPU. So these are the 4 panes in this particular program. Now we are interested to know how this putty.exe is laid down in the memory. So I'll just click on this M button. You see this M button at the top? So I'll just click this M. This will show me the memory map for this particular program. So if I see this memory map, see NITJ, the first thing NITJ is having a PE header. So PE header is called portable executable header. This header is for COM files. This header is for exe files. This header is for DLL files. All these 3 file types exhibit the PE header. PE stands for portable executable file format, PE. Okay. And then if you see, there is a section which is called .txt section, which starts from 401,000 address. So this is the address, and this is the size of this particular code section. These many bytes, okay? 8D000, these bytes this section has. Now text section is basically where your code resides. This is only the read-only section. Here your code of your program will reside. And then we have a data section where your data resides. And then there's another important section which is called resource section, where the resources of your program are there. Basically, resources in Windows programming are used in order to internationalize your program. For example, I have created a calculator, and this calculator is showing me the things in English. I want to see those things in Punjabi. I want to see those things in Hindi. So do I need to code again? No. The coding will remain same because coding is different than the user interface. So I can change the user interface by changing the strings, and those strings will reside inside the resources section. Okay, so these are the typical sections of this particular executable. Similarly, if you go down to another, so these all things are in the memory. So you see there is a file called imm32.dll. There is a file called common dialog 32.dll. All these files have their own sections. So mainly there is a text section, data section, resource section, and relocatable section, which can be relocated onto the any part of a memory. So these are the sections which are available for all kind of files which have a PE header. So I am only showing you a PE header kind of a file. Now, in order to understand this, first of all, let's do one more experiment. Are you able to see this window, command prompt?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's do an experiment here. I'll go to, let's say I go to Windows directory, system32 directory, and I'll simply say type notepad.exe. What will happen? Yes, Pavan, what will happen?
So what is the command written?
You are not able to see?
No, sir.
Oh my God. You should tell me, otherwise I'll go with my flow.
No, others said yes, so I was checking my system settings.
Yeah,
It
is
will
it,
open text editor.
huh?
Sir, it will open text editor.
It will open text editor. Just hold a second here. Let me adjust the size of this window. So this is why this online teaching is tough task, you know.
It's visible now, so it's visible.
And people use. I refrain from using this. This has very bad interface. Your Google Meet, because it consumes so much of space of yours. So now, if I type notepad.exe, somebody said that it will open editor. It will not open editor. Basically, type is a command which is used to show you the content of the file. If it is a text file, the text will get dumped on the screen. If it is something else will get dumped on the screen. Okay. So because it is an executable file, you see what happens if I press enter here. So it shows me some garbage. Okay. But this garbage, if you look in here, it says it starts with MZ signature and it says this program cannot be run in the DOS mode. So this part is basically your header. This part is your header. Let me do a small experiment. Let's say I create a directory MD NIT Jalandhar, NIT Jalandhar. Let me create a file. I'll say copycon nitj.txt. And I'll say, this is my first effort to learn malware creation. And I'll just save this. So I have this one file in the directory. If you look at the directory structure, it shows that you have nitj.txt file. Okay, so this file is there in the directory. Now I want to see what is the content of this file. What I will do?
We can type or we can go into.
We can simply say type nitj.txt. nitj.txt. So it shows me the content because the text file, text gets dumped onto the screen. Now, let's say I don't know this extension in this directory, I just rename this file. I say nitj.txt to nitj.exe. I'll say dir. So what is in my directory?
nitj.
nitj.exe. What kind of file it is?
Basically, it is a text file.
It is
now
a-
it is executable file.
Prince says it's a text file. Vikas says it's an executable file. Who decides that what kind of file it is?
Application.
Extension.
Extension. That's bad, Palvi. Extensions are for us, not for operating system.
Application will decide on which it is.
Application will not decide this.
The
Your
content
operating
in the
system reads the header before running that particular file, before opening a file. Let's say if you have a doc file, it will read the header and it will see, okay, you need Microsoft Word to open this file. Similarly, if I have a PPT file, that's for me, it's a PPT. But for operating system, it opens and then it checks, okay, it has a header of PPT. It can be open in PowerPoint. Let this program be given to PowerPoint presentation. So here the problem is, it is nitj.exe. Now, if I run CALC and press enter, what will happen? Tell me. My dear, participate करोगे तो मजा आएगा. ऐसे बैठे बैठे कुछ समझ नहीं आएगा.
Calculator will open.
Calculator will open. Yeah, you see, there is a calculator which gets open. Why calculator got open?
It's an exe.
Where is that exe? Exe is not here. This is only nitj.exe.
It's in Windows. I'll check it.
Okay. So I say CALC and it opens. Calculator. It doesn't do that, madam. Now. So these are the things you need to understand before we can understand the code which is written inside an executable. So we are not able to run this now. The reason is I have made the path variable null. Okay. So if I run it from this, if I say Windows System 32 CALC, it will run. Because I am giving the absolute path. So if you are not giving the absolute path, your file is running from the current directory it sees. If the file is in the current directory, it will run. Otherwise, it will say it's not recognized as internal or external command. Now, same thing is happening here. I have an executable in my directory, but if I say nitj, what will happen now? What will happen if I say nitj now?
Unrecognized command.
Why?
Because maybe path settings, the variable settings, we have not set it as a command that should be executed from the command prompt.
No, but this file is here in this directory only, nitj.exe.
But the extension we have renamed it as exe. So
that's what I am asking. So what went wrong? Can we simply, let's say I have written a program, hello.c, which prints hello on the screen. Now, if I rename that program, instead of hello.c, I rename it to hello.exe. Does this solve my purpose? Are you people with me? Huh, पवन जी बताइए, आप अपना कुछ
Yes,
तो
sir.
बताइए, इधर उधर देख रहे हैं।
Yes, sir.
You tell me what will happen if I say NITJ and press enter.
Sir, it will show unrecognized. I mean, the NITJ is not recognized, it will say.
It is saying the program or feature cannot start or run due to incompatibility with 64-bit version of Windows. That means the window does not recognize this as an executable. And this has happened by virtue of header. So if you look at any of these files, let me go to Windows, Windows.
Captain.
System 32 and type any file. Let's say I type calc.exe. It exhibits the same signature. You see this signature. Same thing. If I type, let's say notepad.exe, it's same signature. Look at this, it has same signature. Similarly, if I look at dir, let's say I'll type chcp.com, so it shows me the same signature. Okay, so these are the signature of your portable executable file. And this is laid out in the memory which I've shown you for putty.exe also. Now, this is very interesting. This MZ stands for Mark Zebowski. He was the Russian who has done the PE format. तो अगर आप कोई भी DLL फाइल खोलेंगे, कोई भी COM फाइल खोलेंगे, कोई भी EXE फाइल ओपन करेंगे, you will be able to see this signature. And this is the start of your MS-DOS stub. Microsoft Disk Operating System का stub है. After that, you have a PE header, and then you have your executable file. And that executable file will have different sections, जो मैंने आपको दिखाए. And this is how it is laid out in the memory. Is this part okay with everyone? Okay. Now let's see what we are going to do here in this program. So there's another interesting thing to note down here. You see the addresses. Now, if you look at the address for NITJ, this address starts with 0044, which is on a lower memory address space. But if you look at this is your DLL file. So DLL files are stored at a higher memory address, and this DLL file is owned by Windows operating environment. So these files are also available there. These are the dynamic link library files which are available in this memory space. Okay. Now this opens up something very interesting. For example, I want to print a dialog box with a OK button. Okay, let's say I want to have an OK button and it says some text here. In my program, I want to create this. So what I'll do, I want to send a call to a message box function. Now this message box function is part of user32 DLL file. Now this DLL file is already loaded in the memory. So if in my program I want this thing to get executed, I'll simply point, first I'll push the parameters, whatever are required, onto the stack, and then I'll call this. I'll say call user32 dot message box A. So when I give a call to this function will transfer it to this 77 something kind of an address and execute the code and show me the dialog box. So this is how basically we use the code. Now my job here is in order to hijack the control, I want that when I double click on PuTTY, first it shows a dialog box where it says hello NITJ. And when I press OK, it will open up the PuTTY program. It's kind of a very minimal thing which has happened. Though it may look scary if I say your system got hacked and you need to press OK. But it is not going to do any harm on your system. Let's first learn that. Then we'll see if I give you the executable file, you are in NIT Jalandhar at this point of time. I'll say, okay, yeah, this is the executable file you need to run in order to understand this lecture. So whenever you people will double click, your Windows prompt will come back to me. And if you have logged in as administrator, I will become administrator. That is more scarier. And this is possible. Let's see how we are going to do this. First, we are going to hijack the initial point. And second, I need to insert a code for dialog box to appear in the executable. Yes? Okay. So that means I need some space within an executable in order to write my code. And we call it as PE code injection. I want to inject a code into already existing executable file. Okay, so how I can insert a code? I need to have space in that particular program. If I have free space only, I can insert my code. If the space is not available, what will happen? I'll not be able to find. I'll not be able to inject something in there. So it is very important for you people to know that we can find some code caves in the existing executable file. If the code caves are available, I'll utilize these code caves to enter my code. If these codes are not available, I'll do some other method in order to insert the code as an injection part. So how we find the code caves in an executable? Anybody? If anybody knows this? Let me ask you a very simple question, Vikas. Let's say I have to sort 10 numbers.
Yes, sir.
1, 3, 2, 4, 9, 20. And these are the 10 numbers in an array. I want to sort them. I want you to write a C program. First, to accept these 10 numbers from a user. So what you are going to do, you are going to declare an array. You will say integer array. What would be the size of array you want to declare?
Yes.
How much would be the
Maybe-
size? Huh?
More than the element required.
No, I'm not aware. The user will enter 10 or 20 or 30.
Right.
What is the typical thing you will enter? What is the typical thing you will enter?
It can be a dynamic input.
No, I don't want to go dynamically. I just want to create an array. यार. I don't know. मैं कोई linked list malloc मूलक नहीं हूँ.
Basically, in general, we will take 100 size.
100 size. This is general. I'm just asking very general questions. Yeah. Let's say I say 100. But you are only utilizing 10. That means 90 spaces are getting waste.
Right.
Now these 90 spaces are basically memory leak, which will help me to find the code cave.
Yes.
Now, you know, this is very, very important thing to see. If your program is hard coded, it is more secure. If your program is flexible, it will have some problem. But I'm not saying that you don't write the code like this, but usually the people don't pay attention here that what should be the size of my array, because it does not cost. They say, okay, 1,000, but nobody ever thinks that whether I will require 1,000 array or no. So that becomes part of your executable as a code cave. So if I can find these kind of spaces in my executable, I'll be able to insert some stuff. But that is a difficult part. So we are going to use some easy method in order to find a cave. So uske liye what we are going to do, let's go to this screen. So now we understand that there are these sections of an executable file. Now I'll just close the debugger. I'll use a tool called LODPE in order to create a new section in the executable. So I'll say PE editor. I'll open NITJ here and I'll see the section. So these were the section which we were able to see. This section, everything is visible to you?
So if you can increase the size a bit, please.
It's okay now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me create a section. I'll say add a section header. So I'll just edit this section header and rename it to, let's say, msync. This is a new section which I am entering, and I am entering a 5,000 bytes, which is good enough a section for me to insert the malicious code. I'll say okay, close, okay, close, and close. So I have got NITJ now, a file with a new added section, and that section is called .msync. Now let me double click on this file. See what happens. I get an error message from Windows. It says NITJ is not a valid Win32 application. What happened? What went wrong? See, we have changed the header and told executable that there is a section of 5,000 bytes. But when the operating system runs, it actually checks what are the section and what are the sizes of those sections. And then actually it checks it for a checksum. If the size is matching, then only the operating system will run. Now what is happening? We have changed the header, but we have not added 5,000 bytes to the executable. So your operating system says there is a mismatch. I will not run this file. So what we do now, we'll use a hex editor and add 5,000 bytes to this file. So we'll open NITJ file and I'll go to the end of this file and I'll say insert string 5,000 bytes. So 5,000 bytes got added to this file. So now I'll save this file, I'll exit, and I'll double click on this. Windows says, okay, I have no problem now. So we have added 5,000 bytes into the executable, and this section is available for me to insert the malicious code. Followed? Now, if I right click on this and I'll say scan NITJ. So this executable is saying the threat detected. The reason being there is some infection which has happened because I used a file in order to insert the code into this. Okay, so now what I'll do, I'll simply open my OLEDEG and I'll open this file nitj.exe. Now I see the sections. I see what is there in the sections. So you have a new section here which is added to NITJ, and this is at this particular address 510000. So new section is there for this particular executable file. Now what I will do now, I'll copy this address because now we are going to manipulate this. So I am going to right click this, I'll say copy this address and I'll prepare a notepad. I'll say code cave address because this is my new code cave where I'm going to insert my code. Right? I'll now go back to my executable file and copy the few lines from the top because I want to preserve this because I have to come back to the original executable. So I want to display a dialog box. Once the person clicks OK, I want the original executable to get executed. So that means I need to return the control. So I'll just copy these few bytes and I'll copy it in my notepad and I name it as original entry point of the program. So I have saved this original entry point. I have a code cave address to play with. Now let's go and play with this address. I'll just copy this address. Okay. So the first instruction, what I'm going to do, I'm going to manipulate this instruction. So when you are manipulating this instruction, you simply press space bar and you say jump to this address. So that means as soon as I enter into this program, it should take me to my section. Are you people getting this?
This line jump to that location, you're writing as the first line of the code, right, sir?
First line of the code.
Yeah.
Okay, so this I'm going to assemble. So when I say assemble, you see the color got changed to red and this particular code has been inserted in the executable file. So now I'll just right click on this and I'll say copy executable selection and I'll say save this file. So I'll create a new version of this file NITJ1. So now if I go here, I have a new avatar of NITJ1. So if I double click on NITJ, it is showing me the PuTTY interface. If I double click on NITJ1, what will happen? What will happen? Because the entry point is taking me to new section, so it may not do anything. So when I double clicking, it's not opening up. Okay, so now we need to implement the code here. And once that code gets finished, I'll come back to my original code and open that window. Does it sound interesting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's do it. So I'll go to Oli again. And in the Oli, I'll open my file NITJ1 now. Okay, because this is a new avatar. So now because I'm in a debugging mode, I'll just open this. I'll simply come here and I press F7 key because I am debugging this program. So when I press F7, see what happens. It takes me to this address, which is start of my new code cave. So what we are going to do here, we are going to select few bytes. Let's say I select these many bytes and I right click and say binary fill with no operation. So I am adding few no operations to this particular program. So no operation is an instruction which is executed by CPU, so a cycle is wasted. A CPU cycle will get wasted. But this is a legitimate instruction. But this is not my job. Mera ye job nahi hai. So what I am going to do, first of all, let me save this file. I have changed it, so I'll just save this selection. I'll save file and rename it NIT1 only. So I'm not going to disturb this, right? I go to again Oli DEG, Oli NITJ. It's F7, so I'm here. Actually, this got closed, so I'll just simply, this much is good enough. So I'll say binary, fill with knobs. I'll say copy executable selection, and I'll say save file, okay. So I'll restart this debugger so that I have this changes in place. So when I press F7, I am again back, but now have all the knobs. So here I'm going to do experimentation. So what I'll do, I'll select few bytes and I'll say binary edit. Here I can enter a string. Let's say I enter a string. I say hello NIT Jalandhar demo. Okay. So I have created this particular string in the memory. So if you see, it has written this code in order to write that particular line in the memory. So this code is there, it is sitting. So now is the time to know what are the parameters which need to be passed to a dialog box in order to invoke the dialog box. So what we'll do, I'll go to, let's say, go to this part and search internet for message box A details. So this is a message box function in Windows. You see what it wants. It wants 4 parameters to be passed. First is the handle to the window. Second is the long pointer to the text, which is to be displayed. Third one is also the caption, which is also a string. And finally, then you have a type of the dialog box. Whether you want a OK button, or you want a cancel retry continue button, or you want the abort retry button. So what kind of a dialog box you want, you can specify, you will get. So that means I need 4 parameters. Okay, let's write this code. Now, with this know-how, I am going to start typing the code here. So the first thing I want, push 0. The first parameter should get pushed onto the stack. And second parameter is push this particular address. If you note down this address is 0051 000F. So this is the address. When I assemble this actually push this particular address onto the stack. Then similarly another parameter, and finally we have a parameter. We have wasted some space. No problem. Let me first save this part. Okay, we have created this string. And then we have, because we have to push 4 parameters and I have only 1 space left. So this is because this is live experimentation. So let me just open it again and repeat this stuff because I've lost few bytes. So I'll just restart this and quickly start experimenting. So let me first write, let me go pretty deep here. And I'll select few bytes here and I'll say binary edit and I'll say this string hello NITJ demo NITJ demo class. Okay. So this is an NITJ demo class. Let me go up here and start doing push 0. And then I need to push the address of this string. Now this string address is 00510020. Okay. So I'll assemble this again. And now I say again push. Because that's the last parameter, push 0. I want only a OK button. And then I'll say call user 32. I'll say call user 32 dot message box A, message box A. Okay. So I have created this stuff here. So let me just save these bytes to this file and see what happens. I'll say copy to the executable selection, and then I'll say save file. We'll name it as NITJ1 only. Yes. Okay. So now see what will happen. Let me restart the debugger. Now I press F7, see what has happened. I have entered here. Now see what is happening. So you pay attention onto this part. This is my stack. Okay, you look at the stack below. So when I say F7 again, see what is happening. So the first instruction gets executed. Now is the push. So 0 has been pushed onto the stack. You see 0 has been pushed onto the stack. Now I say F7 again. So this particular address got pushed onto the stack. Okay. Then I again say F7. The other address got pushed onto the stack. And then I say 0. Now you see what is happening here. It has actually deciphered the whole thing for me. Now you see it has deciphered the whole thing for me. It says the style of the dialog box is MBOK. And this is a model dialog box. And the title of the string is Hello NIT Demo Class. Hello NIT Demo Class. And the owner is 0. So now if I press F8 button, so it is going to execute this dialog box. You see this? It says Hello NIT Demo. You see this string? The whole string is coming. Now when I press OK, so it will return the control back. So if I just close the debugger, this was the debugger which was showing you. If I simply run this NITJ now, see what is happening? It's showing me the dialog box. But when I say OK, it is not returning because we haven't got the control back. So now we are going to take advantage of the code which we have saved in order to call back the original program. Okay, let's see. So I again invoke my debugger. I'll open NITJ. I'll press F7. I am in this code. Here I am going to enter these two things because after the call, these instructions are getting executed. So here only I'll insert my code. And what was that code? We have already saved here. So I'm going to use this instruction, which is a call instruction. So I'll simply go here and let's paste this. And I'll give this address. So this is the first thing which we are going to do. So I'm going to call. This is the original entry point. And after the call, we have another instruction. And that instruction is jump to this address. And once I jump to this address, the whole flow will follow. I'll say, I'll copy this. I'll say jump to this address. Assemble. So we have added these two instructions and these two instructions will execute my program, the original program. Okay. I think it had disturbed our original code. Let me do experimentation, otherwise we'll change it again. Okay. Or let me just do one more thing. I restart this. We'll take some upper part of the executable. So we'll say F7, we are here. Let me start from here itself rather than going more deep into this. So I'll simply copy this. So I'll paste it. So this is the address where I want to do a call. This is the original entry point of my program. And also I had a jump instruction. So I'll copy this address. Okay. And I'll assemble this. I'll say jump to this address. Assemble. Good. So we have a perfect flow because there is a knob and then our code is there. So let me save this. I'll say copy executable selection and I'll say save file. I name it as NITJ2. Save. Double click. Okay, now we have another version of NITJ2 which is available. Now, if I run this file, what I'm expecting, it should open a dialog box. When I click OK, it should open the PuTTY interface. Okay, let's see if it works. When I say OK, perfect. Now our job is, instead of just displaying OK and a dialog box, I want to do something in the background. I don't want anybody will ever come to know that something has happened in the background. That is basically a complete malware. Okay, so I am stopping here for 2-3 minutes in order so that you people can just whatever you have learned so far, keep it in committed to the memory. And if you have any questions, you can ask those questions. If it would have been a live session, I could have taken a chai break. Okay. But because this is a live session, I'm just giving you another 2-3 minutes in order to just ponder what we did. If you come up with any questions, we'll take those questions before we are going to write some code where we are going to do something else, then just displaying a dialog box. Okay. Let me know once you people are ready with, I'll just giving you, it's 11:46. I'll come back at 11:48. Okay.
So I'll just repeat the steps that you did. First thing we did was we inserted the first line we did was jump to some subroutine we did, and then we added that like dialog box, that pop-up. No operations were added to the code after that, and after from those no operations unused area, then we used to insert that dialog box code. That's what we did.
Yes, we did this only. And also within that NOPs, we have also retrieved back the original flow of the program.
Yes, that's also like correct. From NOPs, after inserting the dialog box, and then we made it to jump to the original program.
Yes.
Okay. So like if you could once again tell me, maybe I missed a minute somehow because somebody visited me. So how you added no ops into that? Just I wanted to know, no ops I missed it, how it was added.
Okay. And just I'll go back to Oli. So you open up any executable where you want to add knobs.
Right.
So let me again go back to NITJ1. Okay, let's say I am in this space. I want to add these few knobs here. I'll select those instructions where I want to do knob. I'll right click here and say binary fill with knobs.
Okay.
So once I do this, knobs are available.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
If anybody has any other query, else we can go back to the program. Okay, welcome back. So if I may ask those people, can a programmer run many operations in the background? Yes, he can do that. You can do n number of operation at the background. It depends upon how you code it. So if you have a multitasking code, it can do n number of tasks in the background. Okay. So we have now this NIT J2. So may I ask the people who are on, yeah, Vikas is there. Palvi, you can also make your video was there. And anybody else who wants to, it's open. Okay. All right. So we had created an NIT2J, but it's not actually exciting me. What this dialog box is meant to give me. No excitement. So I want something else. In order to know that something else, let me first of all show you something here. Let's say, if I give a command netstat -an mode, okay, what happens? It shows me the ports which are open on this machine. That means any remote user can hook onto this particular port number. Any remote user can hook onto this port number. And if I have an application running at that particular port number, that application will listen. Right? For example, if I have port number 80 on, the people will be able to talk to my web server. Now, what I want to do here, मैं क्या करना चाहता हूं यहाँ? I want to open, whenever somebody runs my program, I want to open a secret port and bind the shell of this particular operating system to that. Now, because I as a hacker only know that that particular port is available and what is the task of that port, I will listen, I will get connected to that particular port and I'll win your shell. And this all will happen in the background. Are you able to understand what is the job now? Job at hand is we should add some code into this executable which will give your shell to me by virtue of binding that shell to a port number. So uske liye we need to write a big code, and that big code will run in thousands of lines, which we don't want to do. So I want to use some already made shell code and put that shell code inside this executable to show you the experimentation. Fine. So uske liye kya karenge? Let me go to PuTTY and get connected to a Linux box so that I can generate the code. So I am on this box. So I'll use a Metasploit framework in order to generate the code. And that is called the bind shell code. So bind shell code मैं generate कर रहा हूँ. So how I'll do that? I'll run a command called msf.
The font size, sir.
Font size. Is it visible now?
Right, sir. It's visible.
So I'm using a command msf payload. I'll say Windows shell bind TCP. Show me the options. So it says the shell, this is Windows command shell bind TCP inline. Shell code size is 341 bytes and it requires me to just specify the port number in order to generate the shell code. So what I'll do here now, I'll just generate the shell code by a command and I'll say msf payload and I'll say generate. Generate the bind shell and that will be a raw file. I want to create a raw file and that raw file will help me in order to run the code inside my executable and which will give me your shell. Okay. So I'm going to use this. I'll say bind. So bind TCP, and I only need to give a port number. So I'll give a port number, and I'll give a raw format R, and I'll say NITJ bind. NITJ bind. So I have got the shell code into this particular file. NITJ bind file में मेरे पास मेरा shell code आ गया है. Okay. So now I have a question for you people. NITJ bind, if I look at this, if I say file NITJ bind, this is a data. Okay, this is a raw data. I've used R command in order to generate this raw data. Now, if I say hex edit NITJ bind, I see this is the code which is available for me to put inside my executable file. अब इसमें एक चीज बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग है जो आपको ध्यान देनी है, एंड आई वांट आंसर फ्रॉम योर साइड. सी, दिस इज काइंड ऑफ अ रेप्लिका ऑफ योर OLEDBG's लेफ्ट पेन विच वाज मेमोरी डंप. अगर आपको याद है, ये उसका मेमोरी डंप वाला ही सीन है. ओके, so these are the logical addresses. These are the kind of hexadecimal numbers which are in the memory, and this is the ASCII equivalent. Now my job is to, from here FC, जहां FC लिखा हुआ है at the top, you see this FC E8 till this D50A. So I have to select these bytes and put it inside my executable file. Now how I will extract this? That is a question. आप मुझे बताओ ये extract कैसे करेंगे? Because it's a editor यार, इसमें तो if I select something, I will select everything. तो इसको select करके एक एक मुझे line delete करनी पड़ेगी. Because I don't need spaces, I only need FCE8890000 these. So I need a stream of characters, and these stream of characters I can put inside my binary. So we are going to play with Windows operating environment, Linux operating environment shell values. Okay, so we'll do a bash scripting here. So I'll say hex dump. I'll use a command called hexdump -c in order to see the content NITJ bind. So what I'm seeing, the same screen is being shown here. Now I want to get rid of these left side. I want to get rid of right side. First of all, तो ये मैंने remove करना है. So what I'll do, I'll go on counting. These are called fields. So this is the file in which this is field 1. This space is field 2. This is field 3, field 4. Okay, so you go on counting and extract these values onto some file. So what I'll do, I'll simply say hexdump, and I'll say pipe it to cut command, and I'll say cut on a delimiter which is space, and give me the field number 3. Now see what is the output of this. It gives me the one full stream. लेकिन मुझे ये नहीं चाहिए, मुझे पूरा का पूरा ब्लॉक चाहिए. So I'll say give me F3 to F20. So I'm getting the whole stuff. If I say give me to 22, so it is giving me the whole. तो मुझे कहां तक चाहिए? I need it only till 20, because the last one is 8B. If you see this stuff, The first part is FC and last one is 8P. That means I need only this much of data till 0A. Starting from FCEA till 0A, I need this data to be captured by me as a stream of characters. So I'll say, give me these 20. 20 is good enough. It is giving me the whole story. So now I'll again cut because I don't need these spaces. So I'll say translate minus D and space. I don't need any spaces to be in between. So it has translated, all spaces gone. And also I don't need the enter character, which is at the last of each line. So I'll say translate minus D / N. So I got a stream of characters. So I'll copy these stream of characters now. So I'll copy this stuff. Okay, so I have copied this. And now what I'll do, let me paste it in my, okay, this is the stream of characters which I need to paste in my executable in order to bind port number 444 with the command prompt. Understood this? So let me go back to my NITJ1, the first avatar. So I'll just open it in OLEDBG. I'll open NITJ1. I press F7. I'm inside the file. So I don't need now this kind of a code. I need only, let me show you. I'll just, because it's a 341 bytes, it's not a small code. So I'll select more than 341 here and convert them into NOPs. And then paste that stuff here. Okay. So let me select, I think it's good enough. Or let me do one more. Thoda sa aur select kar lete hain. Or you can do a byte calculator and you will come to know exactly how much space you need to select. And that's up to you. So I have selected good enough space. So I'll simply say binary fill with knobs. So I have so many knobs I have selected here. I'll simply say copy to the executable selection and save file and save it as NITJ only. So I have now good amount of space available so that I can fill my executable with the code which I wish to run. Okay, so I'll start from here. I'll select a good amount of space so that I can binary paste that stream of characters which I selected. And you know they were starting from FC and ending at 0A. This is only for you to memorize that I have copied everything. Otherwise, your code may not run. Okay. So I have now enough space. So I'll now simply go here and say binary paste. So when I do binary paste, you see it started with FC. It has started with FC. Okay, FCE8 if you remember. And this code is generated by this operating environment. So I have just copied the streams. And if I go down and look at 0A was my last part, because that is very important. We need to check that we have copied the whole code. Otherwise there will be a problem. So we have copied till 0A. If you remember, it was till 0A. So the whole code got copied. Now is the time to select this and save this file and see what happens. So precisely these are 341 bytes which we have copied, and I'm going to save this I'll say copy to the executable selection, and I'll say save file and save it as NJT3. Okay, this file got saved now. Let me just stop here. We have created an NITJ3. Okay. Now I have not retrieved back the original flow. Original flow के लिए अभी हमें क्या करना पड़ेगा? Once I am done through this, I am going to call those two instructions which I showcased in the previous one. But that is kind of a homework for you people to do that. But let me first try to run this file and see what has happened. Okay. So what I am going to do here. So let me first run this command prompt, and I'll run netstat -an more. Now you look at these port numbers which are given here, this port number 21, 25. Are you able to see these all? This is port number 20, 25, all these port numbers. Okay. So are you able to see port number 4444 here? Yes, Palvi.
No, it is
No,
not.
it's not there. That means if somebody, let's say from this machine, I try to make a connection to Windows machine at port number 444. See what will happen. If I say netcat, okay, to 192.168.56.135, which is the IP of my Windows machine. And I say connect at port number 444. See what happens. It says connection refused because this port is not available to accept the connection. Now, because we have already created the code, let me run that code and show you what would have happened if somebody would have double click on that executable. So we have this NITJ3 here. So I'll double click on NITJ3. What happened? It is not opening any interface. The reason being interface is not available. But if I go here and now I say, run this command again, it should have open port number 444. Let's see. You see this port? Are you able to see the port? 444 is there. And it is in a listen state. It is listening for somebody to make a connection. Now let's go and make a connection. I'm going to repeat the same command. See what happened? I got that machine's shell. And if I type any command here, which is of Windows operating environment, if I say ipconfig, you see, I am connected to that machine. So now because I was logged in as administrator, I got the administrator privilege. That is a kind of a danger which can happen when you are surfing net with the admin privilege. And many people doesn't know. अगर मैं उनसे पूछता हूँ with which user you are surfing internet, they say I am, ये मेरा laptop है, I log in as admin only. But this is very, very dangerous. So now I can have access to any of the files from this system. And this is actually a perfect Trojan which can get created because this is in the background. Now your job is to simply maintain that connection back. Now if I open it again, if I go here and I say command prompt, I say netstat -an more, port number 444 gone because I exited that. Okay. Now our job is to retrieve back the original functionality of NITJ. So what I am going to do, I'll go to only. I'll open the debugger. I'll open NIT3J3 file. 3 file. So here, when I go to my code, at the end of this code, once this code gets finished, here at some location, I'm going to assemble and retrieve back the original entry point. So this was my original entry point. So I'll just copy this. And here I am going to write this code. I'll say assemble, and then I'll just copy this jump instruction and I'll paste it here. I'll say jump to this address, assemble, cancel. So these are the two instructions which will bring back the original PuTTY interface back to me. So I'll save this file, copy selection, save file. I'll say NIT final, NITJ final. Okay. So this is my final file. I'll go back here and go to the command prompt, check netstat -a and more. Port number 44 is not available. Okay. Now I'll go so that I can make a connection. So I'll say NC 192.168.56.135, port number 444, connection refused because that port is not available. Now I give you this executable file and say, okay, yeah, this will help you to get connected remotely, but this is a Trojan file. So once he clicks on this, see what happens. It has opened the port number 444. Okay. Now the connection is available to me. I can do a netstat. This connection is available. I can exit out of it. Okay. And I'll get my PuTTY interface back if everything is fine. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the PuTTY interface back. So that is the experimentation. I leave this experimentation for you people to do experimentation back home and try to do those changes. So that's it from my side. I don't want to go further into this stuff. I want you people to have queries getting resolved. If you have any question regarding this, please go ahead and ask. The stage is on. Because we are already at 12:15, we have another 10 minutes for this session to get completed. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and ask.
Like, sir, is it like the code that we wrote, the last code that we wrote, is it same like creating a payload?
Yeah, this is a payload. This is called shell code, madam.
So we already have some payloads already available over the net. So can we use same payloads also?
Yes, yes.
Those payloads
Yes.
that can be.
Only problem with those shell code is that they are recognized by n number of antivirus companies.
Yes, yes, that is true. Now, for research purpose, they have made available many payloads and
for
exploits.
research purpose, it is available. You can do n number of experiments, no problem.
Experiments can be done. Yes.
But if you want to market it, then there will be a problem because then the antivirus will say this file is malicious.
Right.
Then the user will not run it. So the alternate is what basically we people do. We take this code, we encrypt this code, and then embed into an executable. Now the advantage is the antivirus will also get fooled and people will not be able to know what kind of code is inside it because it is encrypted code.
Okay. And this embedding of this payload will definitely increase the size of the file.
This will do. Yeah.
So this is never known to user, maybe probably will, because if a hash is generated, maybe so he gets the file with embedded code. So like user को तो कभी पता नहीं पड़ता होगा that there is something.
Never. He will never come to know.
Okay.
See what happens basically whenever you download any file. Let me show you one more thing. Let me share my screen. You're able to see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Now you see here. If I go to internet and I say www.google.com. And here I say PuTTY, I'm just giving an example, PuTTY download. See, when I click here on this PuTTY download, you see what is happening here? They are giving you the signature. Already they are giving you the signature.
Right.
But how many people see these signatures?
True.
So they are giving you the signature. If you click on this signature, this is the GPG file. This is called a pretty good privacy file. So if you open the file, now you compare the signature of the PuTTY which we created, the signature of this PuTTY, they will differ.
It has to be different, right.
But many of us, we never look at these signatures which are already provided by these organizations. So we just download and run that, and that may have some malicious code inside.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Any other question? So Dipanshu is asking a question. Malware analysis basically helps in preventing similar kind of malware attacks or just that attack? Malware analysis can prevent n number of attacks, not just this one. You can do a statical analysis, you can do a dynamical analysis, you can look at the memory leaks, you can look at the sections, you can look whether the binary is packed or unpacked. All those things collected together will give you insight into what kind of binary it is. This is how the malware analysis will happen. Okay. So thank you very much from my side. Dr. Samavir, you take over and let me know if that's fine or anything else to be done from my side.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much,
Thank
sir,
you, sir.
for
It
your
was a
informative
wonderful
and knowledgeable talk.
Thank you.
Yes, any question, participants? Okay. We sincerely thanks for accepting our invitation and giving talk here, sir. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay. Thank you very much. I can leave now.
Right, sir. Right.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay, sir. Bye. Thank you.